welcome to Sleepy Story Facts, and to this gentle bedtime story designed to help you drift into deep sleep, where tonight's relaxing story carries you far beyond Earth, out past the familiar blue world, beyond the bright rings of Saturn, and into the calm, honey-dark hush of Titan, a moon wrapped in thick golden air and quiet wonder. If you are settling beneath a blanket or resting your head against a pillow, let this sleep story meet you softly where you are, because nothing is required of you now except rest and the simple permission to listen without effort. Let your breathing become a little slower, a little easier, as though the night itself has placed a warm hand on your shoulder and invited you to loosen the day from your muscles, your thoughts, your jaw, your brow, and the small, tight places you may not even have noticed were holding on. In this nighttime story, you do not need to remember every detail, because the facts may simply float by like lanterns in a distant fog. And if some of them stay with you, that is lovely. And if they do not, that is lovely too. Titan is Saturn's largest moon, and it is famous for its dense atmosphere, orange haze, and lakes and seas of liquid methane and ethane, making it one of the most dreamlike places in the solar system. So before we begin our slow wandering there, take one quiet breath in and let it out gently, and imagine that every exhale makes you a little heavier in the bed, while every thought becomes lighter, as if it were drifting upward into a dim and peaceful sky. This is your gentle bedtime, your calming narration for the dark hours, your slow path toward rest. And now, in the hush of this bedtime story, imagine that you are arriving not with noise or urgency, but with the softness of a feather settling through mist, descending through Titan's thick air so gradually that it barely feels like falling at all. Titan's atmosphere is even denser than Earth's, rich in nitrogen and layered with a hazy veil that softens the sunlight into a deep amber glow. Because of that heavy air, everything seems slowed, softened, and wrapped in quiet, as if the whole moon were designed especially for those who long to fall asleep beneath an alien sky that does not glare, but glows. Below you, the land appears in muted shades of bronze and umber, and here and there lie dark, still seas, not of water, but of hydrocarbons, smooth and glassy, and patient beyond words. Titan truly has lakes and seas of liquid methane and ethane near its poles, along with rivers and channels carved into its surface. You do not need to be startled by how unusual that is, because in this relaxing story, even the strange things are gentle, and even the unfamiliar feels tender, as though science itself were whispering softly in the dark. The shore that comes into view is calm and level, and the ground beneath it is made not of ordinary rock, but largely of water ice, frozen so hard in Titan's deep cold that it behaves like stone. Imagine stepping there with impossible ease, your feet touching softly onto a plain where the air is thick, the sky is dim, and the whole world seems to breathe more slowly than anywhere else. Titan is bitterly cold, with surface temperatures near -179 degrees Celsius. Yet, in the safety of this sleep story, that cold is not harsh, only distant and crystalline, like the idea of winter rather than its bite. Around you, the haze turns the horizon into velvet, and far above, hidden and half revealed through the orange atmosphere, there is the faint sense of Saturn, enormous and pale, watching quietly from above like a patient lantern behind silk. You begin to walk, though on Titan walking feels different, because the gravity here is much lower than on Earth, and every step seems lighter, slower, almost like moving through a lovely dream that has no sharp edges. There is no rush in your body now, no need to arrive anywhere quickly, because the path itself is the whole point, and the story is simply the act of drifting onward. Beside you lies a methane lake so still that it reflects the dim sky like polished glass, and along its edge, the land curves in smooth, dark lines, shaped by patient weather and ancient liquid. Scientists have found that Titan has active weather, clouds, rain, and surface features shaped by flowing methane, making it in some ways eerily Earth-like. Despite being profoundly alien, that small resemblance is comforting, perhaps, because even so far from home, there are familiar patterns, shorelines, and clouds and channels, reminders that the universe enjoys repeating certain soft ideas in different forms. As you continue in this calming sleep story, you may notice how naturally the mind begins to quiet when given one gentle image after another. A still shoreline, a hazy sky, a silent moon, a distant planet, the feeling of thick air resting against a quiet world. And if your thoughts wander, let them wander kindly, because that too is part of the rhythm of deep sleep, the coming and going, the little tides of attention that slowly smooth themselves out. Somewhere ahead, beyond the dark shore, low rounded ridges rest beneath the haze, and beyond them are vast dune fields, long and dark, and softly sculpted by Titan's winds. Titan is known for broad dune regions as well as lake districts, showing that wind and liquid have both shaped its surface over long spans of time. But you do not need to picture them too sharply. Let them remain distant and blurred, like forms seen through closed eyelashes. All that matters is that this world is real and quiet and waiting. And tonight, it has become the setting for your gentle bedtime, your sleep story of thick air and methane lakes, your serene passage into rest. So keep moving slowly along the orange shore for just a little while longer, hearing nothing, hurrying nowhere, while the great hush of Titan settles around you like a second blanket. And the night, both yours and Titan's, grows deeper and softer still. You continue along the quiet edge of the methane lake, and with each unhurried step, the world seems to grow softer, as though Titan itself were slowly exhaling around you, its thick atmosphere wrapping every hill, every shore, every distant dune in a veil of amber calm. And because this is a sleep story, a bedtime story made for the slow easing of body and mind. You do not need to ask anything of this place, except that it keep you company, while wakefulness loosens its hold. The air here feels full and velvety in the imagination, not empty and sharp. And that feeling comes from something real, because Titan's atmosphere is remarkably dense and is composed mostly of nitrogen, with methane playing an important role in its weather and chemistry. If you pause for a moment beside the dark water, you can imagine that deep, heavy air resting against your skin like the light pressure of an extra blanket, the kind that tells the nervous system it is safe now, safe enough to fall asleep by degrees, safe enough to stop chasing the last bright thoughts of the day. Nothing moves quickly here. Even the light seems to arrive slowly, filtered through layers of haze that soften the sun into a dim copper glow. Titan's high-altitude haze is created through complex atmospheric chemistry, giving the moon its famous orange-gold appearance. In this relaxing story, that haze becomes almost like a curtain between you and everything too sharp, too loud, too immediate. And the more you walk beneath it, the more you feel that the whole moon has been designed in the language of deep sleep, in muted tones and patient silences and distances that never press too close. The lake beside you remains almost perfectly still, though you know that Titan's seas and lakes are not imagined, but real bodies of liquid hydrocarbons, gathered especially in the colder polar regions, where shorelines, channels, and filled basins have been mapped by spacecraft. That knowledge does not make the scene more technical. Instead, it makes it more tender, because there is something profoundly soothing about knowing that somewhere in the solar system there truly are quiet alien shores under a thick and honey-dark sky. You follow the curve of the land as it bends gently away from the water, and your path rises so slightly that you barely notice the change, only the gradual widening of the view. The way the lake begins to spread below you like a polished sheet of obsidian touched by dim orange light. Perhaps, in the softened logic of this nighttime story, you become aware of a faint breeze, not cold in the emotional sense, but clean and far away, moving over the plain with such restraint that it feels more like the memory of motion than motion itself. Winds on Titan help shape vast fields of dunes made from dark organic material, especially in broad equatorial regions. Somewhere beyond the edge of sight, those long dunes lie in parallel bands, patient as sleeping breath, drawn out across the moon in elegant lines by currents of air so gentle seeming that they hardly disturb the mood of the world at all. As you keep walking, the ground beneath your feet, hard as stone in this deep cold, reminds you that Titan's crust is built largely from water ice. Though here water behaves more like rock because the temperature is so low, there is a certain comfort in that reversal, in the way familiar substances become unfamiliar and still remain beautiful. Because this calming narration is not here to test or challenge you, only to guide you through one soft marvel after another, until thought itself becomes slow and spacious. Overhead, the sky remains dusky and complete, with no bright blue openness and no harsh stars breaking through the haze, only a suspended glow that makes time feel difficult to measure. And perhaps that is part of why Titan suits a gentle bedtime so well, because it is a place where ordinary markers dissolve, where the listener can drift without needing to know exactly how many minutes have passed. The dense atmosphere and dim sunlight mean Titan's surface would appear softly lit and subdued rather than brilliant and high contrast. You breathe in that dimness as though it were part of the story's rhythm, and then you breathe out into a wider stillness, and somewhere within that slow exchange your body begins to understand that it can stop preparing for tomorrow, at least for now. The lake is behind you a little more than before, and ahead, the shoreline gives way to low plain and gentle rise, with the distant suggestion of branching channels cut by liquid flow long ago. Or perhaps not so long ago, in Titan's patient seasons. Titan has an active methane cycle, with evaporation, clouds, rainfall, and channels that in some ways echo Earth's water cycle. But here, in this bedtime story, that fact arrives not as a lesson, but as a lullaby. The idea that even on a moon so cold and remote, there are rains and rivers of a kind. There are cycles and returns. There is weather that gathers and releases, and maybe that makes your own thoughts feel less scattered too, as if they belong to a larger rhythm and can settle into it without effort. You slow even more until walking becomes almost standing, and standing becomes almost resting, and resting becomes a kind of quiet listening to a world that says nothing in words, and yet seems full of reassurance. Beneath Titan's thick air, beneath its orange hush, beside its dark and silent seas, nothing asks you to be alert any longer. This sleep story can simply carry you. This relaxing story can keep watch, and you, dear listener, can keep drifting forward through the soft amber dark, one gentle breath at a time, toward deeper calm and deeper sleep. Now the ground rises a little more beneath your feet, so gradually that it feels less like climbing and more like being carried by the shape of Titan itself. And as this sleep story continues, your path leads you away from the quiet methane shore and toward a broader and more open plain, where the world begins to arrange itself into long, dark ribbons resting beneath the orange sky, soft as sleeping waves and still as a held breath. Ahead of you, the land seems to stretch forever, and the farther you look, the more it dissolves into haze, until distance becomes less a measurement than a feeling, a calm and velvety feeling, as if the whole moon were gently wrapped in layers of dusk. Titan is known for extensive dune fields shaped by winds, especially across wide equatorial regions, where dark material has been drawn into long parallel bands across the landscape. But tonight, in this bedtime story, those dunes do not feel harsh or desert-like in the ordinary sense. They feel elegant, unhurried, and almost protective, like long folds in a blanket laid carefully over the sleeping body of the moon. You move between them now with no effort at all, your steps light in Titan's low gravity, your breathing slow, your mind loosening even further as each dune rises and falls beside you in smooth, dark curves. The thick air around you remains one of Titan's great wonders, a real atmosphere rich in nitrogen and softened by methane and high hazes that filter the distant sunlight into a muted amber glow. Because of that dense air, everything in this relaxing story seems cushioned, every edge softened, every horizon blurred just enough to feel kind. And perhaps this is why Titan seems so suited to deep sleep, because it is a place where nothing shines too hard or moves too fast, where even the science arrives with a quiet step and a lowered voice. As you continue along the base of one dune, you notice that the dark grains beneath your feet seem almost silky in the imagination. Though here the word sand means something different from the beaches of Earth, because Titan's surface materials and air chemistry are unlike our own, shaped by cold hydrocarbons, organic haze, and icy ground. Titan's orange haze comes from complex atmospheric chemistry, and its surface combines icy crust with landscapes altered by weather and flowing liquids. In the hush of this gentle bedtime, you do not need to picture the chemistry too sharply. It is enough to feel that this world has been slowly crafted by air, cold, and time, and that all three have worked together with such patience that even the dunes seem less built than sung into place over ages, too vast to trouble your tired thoughts. Somewhere behind you now, hidden by the rise and fall of the terrain, the methane lake is still resting in the dark. But here among the dunes, there is a different kind of calm, a quieter inland calm, where the silence feels broad and dry and wonderfully empty. Not lonely empty, but restful empty, the kind that makes room inside you. You follow the gentle line of a ridge as it bends through the haze, and now and then the dune beside you opens a view toward lower ground, where faint channels seem to thread the plains in delicate branching lines. Titan has rivers, channels, lakes, and seas tied to an active methane cycle of evaporation, clouds, and rain, making it one of the most Earth-like worlds in the solar system in terms of landscape processes. Even though the liquids there are hydrocarbons and the temperatures are far colder, that thought settles over you softly, because there is something comforting in the idea that nature repeats its favorite patterns across the cosmos, that shorelines and weather and flowing paths can exist even here, beneath Saturn's distant watch, under a sky that glows like dim honey. And speaking of Saturn, perhaps now, through a thinner patch of haze, or in a gap above the dunes, you sense rather than fully see the pale giant hanging far above, enormous and quiet, its presence more felt than observed, like a guardian lamp behind a curtain. You do not have to look directly at it. In this nighttime story, it is enough that it is there, just as it is enough that you are here, following this slow route through one of the strangest and gentlest landscapes science has shown us. The dunes continue in long sleeping lines, and you begin to notice that their repetition has its own soothing rhythm. Crest after crest, shadow after shadow, all of it simple, all of it steady, all of it inviting the mind to stop arranging, stop solving, stop preparing. If a thought arrives, let it pass between these dark ridges like a little wind. If another thought follows, let it soften in the haze. There is no need to keep them. Titan will keep the stillness for you. This bedtime story will keep the quiet for you. And as you walk farther into the dune fields, the world seems to grow even more spacious, until it feels as though you are moving inside a dream made from atmosphere and distance and low, soft light. Somewhere above, the orange sky remains thick and gentle. Somewhere below, the icy ground sleeps beneath dark grains shaped by ancient winds. Somewhere far behind, the methane shore waits in perfect silence, and somewhere within you, almost without your noticing, wakefulness is becoming very light indeed, as though it too were just one more fine particle lifted by Titan's patient air and set down gently, gently into sleep. As you move deeper through the long, dark dune fields, the shape of the land begins, very gently, to change again, and the smooth, parallel ridges slowly loosen their hold on the horizon, giving way to flatter ground, where faint channels appear like threads sewn into the surface of a sleeping world. And in this softening landscape, your steps become slower still, as if Titan itself were teaching you how to walk in the language of rest. One unhurried breath and one light footfall at a time, until the whole nighttime story feels less like a journey and more like a floating. The air remains thick around you, dense and velvety. And because Titan's atmosphere is mostly nitrogen and much denser than Earth's, it creates a surface world where light arrives dimly and distance is softened by haze, turning everything into muted layers of amber, bronze, and shadow. In that dimness, the channels ahead seem almost like quiet thoughts taking shape and then dissolving again. But they belong to something very real, because Titan has rivers, stream beds, and branching channels carved by flowing liquid hydrocarbons, a strange and beautiful echo of the water-shaped landscapes of Earth. You come to the edge of one of these winding paths now, and even though it is dry at this moment in the hush of the story, you can imagine the slow movement that once passed through it, a dark current under an orange sky, not hurried, not loud, only steady and patient, leaving behind a line in the land as softly as a finger traced through sand. Somewhere above, high in Titan's atmosphere, methane can gather into clouds and return again as rain, making the moon one of the few places in the solar system where there is an active weather cycle shaping the ground below. There is something deeply calming in that repetition, in the thought that even here, so far from home, the sky and surface remain in gentle conversation, giving and receiving, lifting and returning, cloud to rain and rain to channel and channel to sea, as though Titan too has its own sleepy version of weather, quieter and colder than ours, but guided by the same old rhythm of cycles that ask for no urgency and promise no alarm. You follow the channel as it curves through the plain, and on either side, low rises begin to emerge, broad-backed and rounded, their edges softened by haze until they seem less like hills and more like folded shapes resting beneath a blanket of dim orange light. The solid ground of Titan is thought to be made largely of water ice, but at Titan's frigid temperatures, that ice is as hard and stone-like as rock. That reversal feels almost magical in a bedtime story. Water becoming stone, cold becoming structure, softness becoming firmness. And yet, it is also one of the moon's truest comforts, because it reminds you that the universe is full of quiet transformations, and not all of them need to be understood in order to be soothing. As you continue beside the channel, the land lowers into a smooth basin where the surface darkens faintly, and it becomes easy to imagine that when Titan's methane rains arrive, this hollow may fill with liquid for a time, holding a mirror of dim sky before releasing it again in some slow season yet to come. Titan's lakes and seas are found especially near the poles, but evidence of channels and liquid movement across other regions shows how widely its methane-based weather has shaped the moon. In the gentle logic of this sleep story, you do not need to know exactly where every river leads or every cloud forms. It is enough to know that this moon is not frozen into complete stillness, but lives by subtle circulation, by hush and return, by long pauses interrupted only by soft changes that unfold over spans, so patient they seem made for a tired mind to lean against. The path before you bends toward those low icy hills, and as you near them, you begin to sense the lovely, quiet weight of Titan's low gravity again. The way each step feels easier than it should, lighter than on Earth, almost like walking in a dream where the body has forgotten what heaviness means. Titan's surface gravity is much weaker than Earth's, which would make movement there feel more buoyant and gentle. So you keep walking, or perhaps drifting, along the edge where the channel meets the base of the hills, and the whole scene becomes wonderfully simple. Thick air above, dark line of riverbed beside you, pale ice rock rising softly ahead, and all around it, that rich orange haze that keeps the universe from ever feeling too sharp. Perhaps this is what makes Titan such a natural home for a sleep story, because nothing here appears suddenly, nothing demands to be solved, and even its scientific wonders arrive wrapped in distance and dusk, like gifts left quietly at the edge of awareness. You pass between two low slopes now, and the channel narrows into a shallow passage, as if it were guiding you inward to a more sheltered place where the wind, if there is any wind at all, would be too soft to name. The hills hold the dimness close around you, and the haze above them seems thicker, warmer in color, though still cold in truth. and that small, sheltered corridor feels almost like a room within the moon, a resting place inside the landscape itself. Here, at the meeting of icy ground and ancient flow, you can let the last firmer edges of the day begin to loosen completely. There is no need to follow every image now. You can simply rest inside them. Let the methane rivers become quiet lines in the mind. Let the ice hills become folded shadows. Let the orange sky become a soft lid lowering over thought. And as this bedtime story goes on carrying you through Titan's thick air and serene distance, you may find that the moon is no longer only around you, but within you too. Its hush becoming your hush, its slowness becoming your slowness, until even the idea of continuing feels gentle enough to drift through without effort. Like a dark river under a sleeping sky, the sheltered passage slowly opens before you. And as it does, the low ice-hard hills on either side begin to fall away into a wide and quiet basin, a place so still that it feels less like a landscape and more like a held breath inside Titan's vast and patient body. And because this bedtime story is in no hurry at all, you are free to enter that stillness at the same gentle pace with which sleep enters a tired mind, softly, indirectly, almost without being noticed, until you are simply there inside it, surrounded by muted amber light and the thick, velvety air of this distant moon. Titan's atmosphere is dense, mostly nitrogen, and laced with methane, creating a hazy orange world where sunlight reaches the surface in a dim and softened way. That dimness now seems to gather around the basin like a comforting curtain, and the ground beneath your feet becomes smoother as the old channel broadens into a shallow plain, one that looks as though, in some slow season, it might collect a gentle pool of liquid and hold it in complete silence. Titan has an active methane cycle with clouds, rain, rivers, channels, and lakes, making it one of the most Earth-like worlds in the solar system in the way its surface is shaped by weather. Even though the liquids there are hydrocarbons rather than water, in the calm language of this sleep story, that fact becomes something almost cradle-like, because it means this moon knows the rhythm of return, the long, quiet exchange between sky and land, the patient falling of rain, and the even more patient gathering of that rain into stillness. You pause now near the center of the basin, and the air feels even thicker here, as if the world were leaning close in a protective way, not to speak, but to hush everything unnecessary. And in that hush, your breathing can become slower still. The inhale, a gentle arrival. The exhale, a slow release, until body and story begin to move together with the same untroubled rhythm. Somewhere high above, beyond the heavy orange haze, methane clouds may be forming in the cold layers of Titan's sky, preparing eventually to drift and release their dark rain on plains like this one. And as you imagine that, the whole basin seems to transform in the mind into a future mirror, a sleeping mirror waiting for weather, waiting for liquid to collect across its smooth, low floor, waiting with the kind of patience only moons and oceans and deserts ever truly know. There is nothing empty about this waiting. It is full in its own quiet way, full of potential, full of softness, full of the hush that comes when a place does not need to prove anything in order to be beautiful. All around you, the outlines of the land remain blurred by haze, and the far edge of the basin fades into warm brown shadow, beyond which the low hills continue their slow, rounded shapes, built from water ice, frozen so deeply that on Titan it behaves like stone. That detail drifts over you like a strange but soothing little lullaby. Water become rock, cold become structure, the familiar become dreamlike without ever becoming frightening. And perhaps that is part of Titan's spell, that it lets the mind wander into the unknown while keeping every contour soft enough for deep sleep. If a breeze moves across the basin, it is so faint you feel it more as a change in stillness than as motion itself. And that too belongs here, because winds on Titan help shape broad dune fields and move through a world where the thick atmosphere gives weather and landscape a slow, deliberate quality. Even now, though the dunes are behind you, you can almost sense their long dark backs resting somewhere beyond the hills, and behind them the quiet shore of the Methane lake, and behind that, farther still, the greater darkness of Titan's distant plains, all of it joined together into one immense and sleeping geography beneath Saturn's unseen watch. You do not need to picture the giant planet overhead now. You can simply trust that it is there, far beyond the haze, pale and enormous and perfectly calm, while you remain here in this basin where the world seems to have lowered its voice to almost nothing. As this relaxing story continues, the smooth ground ahead begins to darken in imagination, not with danger, but with the suggestion of gathered liquid. And you can almost see a broad, glassy sheet spreading over the basin floor, reflecting the orange gloom above in a dim bronze shimmer, as if Titan were laying a mirror down for the sky to rest in. Titan's real lakes and seas, especially near its poles, are made of liquid methane and ethane, and their surfaces can appear smooth and dark under the moon's subdued light. In the dream-soft flow of this bedtime story, that imagined mirror is enough to quiet every remaining busy corner of the mind, because mirrors do not chase, and still water does not ask questions, and a sleeping plain beneath thick air offers no demand at all, except that you keep resting, keep listening, keep letting the words move past like low clouds in a distant orange evening. Your steps become so slow now that they are almost symbolic, the idea of walking rather than walking itself. And finally, you come to a place near the center of the basin where it feels natural to stop completely, to stand in Titan's hush and let the whole moon breathe around you. Heavy air above, hard ice below, ancient channels behind, dark low hills beyond, and somewhere in all that serene strangeness, the faint promise of rain that will one day fall in soft, cold drops and gather silently into reflective pools. Here, in the middle of this sleeping mirror of the plain, the nighttime story grows quieter than before, and you can let your thoughts do the same, sinking gently through the amber dimness, settling as softly as rain into a patient hollow, until even the effort of following the story begins to fade, and all that remains is the feeling of being held by a distant moon that knows how to be still. You remain in the quiet center of the basin, and after a while, in the slow and drifting measure of this bedtime story, you begin to notice that the orange dimness above you has changed ever so slightly, not in any sudden or dramatic way, but with the same gentle subtlety by which evening deepens in a peaceful room. And as you lift your awareness toward the thick sky of Titan, it seems as though the haze has gathered itself into softer layers, into calm floating veils that move with such patience they are almost still. And this too belongs to the true nature of this faraway moon, because Titan has clouds, and whether shaped by methane in an atmosphere far denser than Earth's, where hazes soften the sunlight and make the surface glow in muted shades of amber and bronze, in the language of a relaxing story, those clouds feel less like weather and more like thought made visible, like the last waking ideas drifting together and growing quiet overhead before they dissolve into the deeper softness of sleep. And so you do not hurry across the basin or search for shelter, because nothing here asks to be escaped. Not the dimness, not the stillness, not even the possibility of rain, which on Titan is itself a slow and wondrous thing, part of a methane cycle that includes clouds, rainfall, rivers, channels, lakes, and seas spread across this moon's patient landscapes. You simply stand and breathe and let the world become gentler around you. And after a little more time, so little that it feels almost imaginary, the first drops begin to fall, sparse at first, widely spaced, each one arriving through the thick air with a softness that seems perfectly suited to a nighttime story. And when they touch the dark floor of the basin, they leave no sharp sound, only the faintest suggestion of contact, as though the sky were whispering to the ground. Because Titan is so cold, the rain here is not water, but liquid methane, a strange and beautiful reversal that makes familiar weather feel dreamlike, while remaining rooted in real planetary science. That fact does not disturb the calm. Instead, it deepens it, because there is something soothing about a place where the universe has taken one of Earth's oldest patterns and rewritten it in softer, stranger tones. Cloud to methane rain, river to hydrocarbon channel, sea to dark reflective basin, all under a sky that never needs to brighten into harshness. The drops continue, and slowly, very slowly, the shallow ground around you begins to darken into a smoother sheen, until the basin's sleeping mirror starts to wake, not in excitement, but in silence, spreading outward in a glassy skin that reflects the orange hush above. Titan's lakes and seas are known for their dark, smooth surfaces, especially in the polar regions, where large bodies of liquid methane and ethane rest under the moon's dense atmosphere. Here, in the gentle logic of this sleep story, the small pool growing around your feet feels like an inland cousin to those larger seas, a quiet gathering of sky into ground. And the longer you watch it, the more it seems that Titan itself is demonstrating how to rest, how to receive, how to let one thing settle into another without resistance. There is no wind strong enough to trouble the surface, only the occasional widening ring where another cool drop lands and fades, and the air remains thick and cushioned around you, so that even the act of rainfall feels slowed and softened, protected from any harsh edge by the moon's great blanket of atmosphere. Titan's dense nitrogen atmosphere and persistent haze help create a world where light and distance are muted, and where surface scenes would appear calm, subdued, and low in contrast. That subdued quality now spreads through the whole basin until there is almost no difference between sky, horizon, and reflection. Only layers of dim orange, dark bronze, and smooth black-brown liquid. And as you stand in the midst of it, you may feel your own thoughts growing just as level and reflective, losing their separate little ridges and becoming one broad, quiet surface. Beyond the basin, the low hills of water ice remain where they were, unmoving and rounded, their forms softened by haze. And it is comforting to remember that on Titan, the very ground is shaped from materials both familiar and transformed, water frozen into rock-hard solidity by the moon's deep cold, organic particles drifting down from the atmosphere, ancient channels marked by liquid flow over stretches of time too vast to trouble the sleeping mind. Somewhere farther away, beyond the hills, the long dunes continue to rest beneath the orange sky, and beyond them lie the distant shores and seas that made your first welcome to this moon, all of it joined together now by the same serene weather, the same patient exchange between air and land, the same slow repetition that makes Titan feel less like a remote object in space and more like a living lullaby written in science. You do not need to walk any farther for now. It feels right simply to remain still while the rain continues its soft descent, while the mirror of the basin broadens, while the whole moon seems to settle more deeply around you. And perhaps this is where the true heart of tonight's sleep story begins to reveal itself, not in movement, but in peaceful pause, in the art of being exactly where you are without needing to improve or explain it. So let the methane rain fall gently in the distance of your imagination. Let the amber clouds hang low and kind above you. Let the dark, reflective plain hold the dim sky like a polished dream, and let your breathing follow the same pattern as Titan's weather, rising softly, returning softly, until your mind, like this basin, becomes a quiet place where the heavens can rest. The rain continues for a little while longer, never becoming urgent, never turning sharp, but simply arriving in soft intervals through Titan's heavy air. And as this bedtime story drifts onward, you begin to notice that the basin around you has grown into a broad and dark mirror, so smooth in places that it seems to erase the boundary between land and sky, holding the amber dimness above in a silence so complete that even your thoughts seem to lower themselves to match it. And because this is a sleep story meant for deep rest, nothing asks you to move quickly now. Not the clouds, not the shallow liquids spreading over the plain, not the distant hills of ice, and certainly not the calm rhythm of your own breathing, which has become slower and more settled, as though Titan itself were gently teaching your body how to fall asleep by example. Titan is one of the very few worlds known to have stable lakes and seas on its surface, and those liquids are made mostly of methane and ethane rather than water. That real and lovely fact lingers beneath the story like a soft note held under music, making this dark, reflective basin feel even more peaceful, because somewhere in the solar system there truly are alien shores and quiet hydrocarbon seas resting under a sky of orange haze. And tonight your imagination is allowed to stand beside them without effort, without analysis, without needing to do anything except listen and soften. The rain begins to thin now, so gradually that you almost cannot tell when the falling drops become only an occasional touch upon the surface, and each small ring they leave widens and disappears so gently that it resembles a thought dissolving before it can fully form. And after a little longer, the basin becomes almost perfectly still again, a sleeping mirror at rest beneath a sleeping sky. Titan's dense atmosphere, thicker than Earth's and composed mostly of nitrogen, would make the light at the surface feel subdued and filtered by haze. Because of that thickness, the whole world remains muted and velvety, as though every distant thing has been wrapped in fine amber silk. And when you look outward across the widening pool, the low hills at its edges seem to float rather than stand, their water ice ridges half lost in the dimness, rounded and patient and dreamlike. Titan's crust is thought to be made largely of water ice, which behaves like rock at the moon's extremely cold surface temperatures. There is something deeply soothing in that reversal, in the way ordinary water has become the bones of the land here, not liquid but structure, not wave but hill. And perhaps your tired mind welcomes that sort of gentle transformation, because sleep too is a kind of quiet rearranging, a soft shift from one state into another without any need for force. You take a few steps now, not because the story requires it, but because the edge of the new pool has formed a lovely curve nearby, and it feels natural to follow it, the way one might trace the rim of a bowl or the fold of a blanket. And as you move, the low gravity of Titan makes each step feel unhurried and light, almost buoyant, as if the moon were helping you carry less of yourself than usual. Titan's gravity is much weaker than Earth's, making motion there gentler and more floating in feel. So you walk slowly along the dark margin where reflective liquid meets ice-hard ground, and the simple pattern begins to quiet you further. Step, breathe, pause, look, breathe again. With the great hush of the plain, accompanying every movement like the calmest possible kind of music. Somewhere high above the haze, Saturn remains beyond direct sight. But now and then, there is a faint pallor in the orange gloom, a suggestion rather than an image, and in the soft logic of this nighttime story, it feels as though the giant planet is glowing through layer upon layer of mist, like a distant lamp behind a curtain, not bright enough to wake the world, only gentle enough to remind it that it is held in a larger quiet. Titan orbits Saturn and is its largest moon, wrapped in a thick orange atmosphere that hides and softens much of the sky from the surface below. That hidden nearness, that sense of something vast and calm above you, adds another layer of comfort to the scene, because it makes the basin feel sheltered not only by hills and haze, but by the whole patient architecture of the Saturnian night. Far beyond this plain lie the dark dune fields you crossed before, shaped by Titan's winds into long parallel ridges. And beyond them lie older channels, distant lake shores, and broader regions where methane weather has slowly written itself across the moon over immense spans of time. But all of that can remain far away now, softened into background the way waking concerns soften when sleep finally begins to take root. And here in the foreground, there is only the dark mirror, the slow curve of shore, the low icy land, the faint far glow above, and your own breathing becoming quieter with every moment that passes. This calming narration does not need to carry you anywhere dramatic. It can simply stay beside you here on Titan, where the plain has just received its rain, and the world seems freshly washed in dim orange silence. And if your thoughts drift, they may drift like haze across the basin, and if they fade, they may fade like rings on the liquid surface, broadening and disappearing into stillness. You walk a little farther along the sleeping mirror, and then gradually slow again until even movement feels unnecessary, until it is enough just to stand at the edge of the dark reflective pool and let the soft, faraway glow of Saturn remain above you unseen, and let the moon's thick air rest around you like a second night, and let the whole strange, beautiful world become so quiet that your own mind begins to resemble it, dark and smooth and spacious, holding only a dim reflection of the heavens as you drift deeper and deeper towards sleep. After standing for a while beside the dark reflective pool, you begin once more to move, though moving now feels almost indistinguishable from dreaming, and the edge of the basin draws you outward through the amber dimness toward lower land, where the ground gradually smooths and widens, as if Titan were unfolding another quiet room for you inside its immense and patient night. And as this bedtime story continues, the still black mirror behind you becomes only one small part of a much larger calm, because ahead there is the sense of a broader shoreline waiting somewhere beyond the haze, a place where the land gives itself over to something deeper and more expansive. And the thought of that distant, water-like stillness makes your breathing soften even further. Titan is Saturn's largest moon, wrapped in a dense nitrogen atmosphere and a permanent orange haze that softens the surface light into a muted glow. That thick air seems to cradle every step you take, making the world feel padded and low in contrast. The way a room feels just before sleep fully arrives, when edges blur kindly and nothing seems sharp enough to trouble the heart, and so you continue without hurry, following a shallow descent where faint channels appear and disappear beneath your feet like old remembered paths, each one hinting at the moon's patient weather, each one quietly suggesting that this landscape has known the long art of receiving and releasing. Somewhere beyond the basin, beyond the low icy rises, beyond the last softened ridge, the land opens into one of Titan's great northern lake regions. And though you do not need a map in this relaxing story, you can feel the nearness of it now in the way the horizon lowers and the hush seems to widen, as though the world ahead were becoming flatter, darker, and more reflective with every gentle step. Titan is famous for its lakes and seas of liquid methane and ethane, especially in the polar regions, where large dark bodies of liquid rest beneath the moon's subdued sky. There is something profoundly soothing in that fact, perhaps because seas imply waiting, and waiting implies spaciousness, and spaciousness gives the mind permission to stop clutching at the day and let it slip quietly away. And soon the path you are following brings you to a low shelf of ice-hard ground where the haze parts just enough for a vast dark surface to emerge before you. Not bright, not gleaming, but quietly present like a giant sheet of polished obsidian laid beneath the sky. You have arrived at the edge of a northern sea, and it is so still that it almost seems to absorb sound before sound can exist, and so broad that the far shore is only a rumor somewhere inside the haze. And if Titan has a place most suited to gentle bedtime, to deep sleep, to the loosening of every busy thought, it may be this, where the moon's long weather has gathered itself into a single resting body that does not move unless a whisper of air invites it. You stand at the margin where the dark liquid meets frozen ground, and for a while that is all there is. The quiet contact between sea and shore, the thick orange air above, the low hidden heavens beyond, and your own small awareness settling into the scale of it, no longer trying to measure or interpret, only receiving. Titan's surface gravity is far weaker than Earth's, so movement there would feel lighter and more buoyant, as though the body were carrying less of its usual weight. Perhaps that is why, when you begin to walk along the shoreline, it feels less like walking and more like gliding, a slow drifting motion between hard icy land and the dark patient sea, and the simple repetition of it becomes its own kind of lullaby. Step and breath, breath and step, with the amber haze holding everything in one continuous tone of softness. Now and then, the shoreline curves inward and forms small coves where the liquid lies even more motionless than before. And in those sheltered pockets, the sea seems almost to disappear into pure reflection, becoming so dark and level that it feels like a place where thoughts could go to sleep and never be asked to wake again until morning. No voices reach you here. No wind insists on itself. Even the idea of distance seems to dissolve, because the haze keeps all far things tender and uncertain. And that uncertainty is comforting in this nighttime story, not because it confuses, but because it frees you from the need to know where everything ends. Somewhere above, Saturn remains hidden or half-sensed through the thick atmosphere, a pale giant beyond the veil. And that unseen presence makes the sea feel sheltered inside a larger stillness, as if the whole Saturnian system were resting quietly around you with no purpose except to hold this one silent moment in place. You walk a little farther, and then, naturally, stop again where the shore broadens into a smooth, dark arc. And here the northern sea stretches beside you like a sleeping companion, vast and untroubled. And if the surface moves at all, it does so only in the faintest imagined ripple, too soft to disturb the calm. In this place, all the facts of Titan become gentler than facts usually are. Thick air becomes comfort, methane becomes mirror, ice becomes shore, distance becomes rest, and science itself becomes a kind of cradle rocking slowly beneath the listener. So remain here now at the hushed edge of the northern sea, with the orange sky dim above you and the dark, liquid beside you, and the moon's vast patience all around. And let the story grow even quieter than before, quiet enough that you no longer need to follow every sentence, quiet enough that each word can simply drift past like haze over a black, calm surface, quiet enough that somewhere between one breath and the next, you may already be slipping deeper into sleep. You remain beside the northern sea, and after a long while, so long that time itself begins to feel soft around the edges, you become aware that the stillness here is not empty at all, but full of tiny, quiet motions too gentle to disturb the calm, as if the great dark body beside you were breathing in its sleep. And because this bedtime story is meant to carry you deeper and deeper into rest, you do not need to watch too closely or understand every small change, but only let the idea of that sleeping breath settle into you, the way a peaceful room settles around a tired person when the light is low and the blankets are warm. Titan's largest lakes and seas are concentrated near its poles, where broad, dark surfaces of liquid methane and ethane rest beneath the moon's thick orange atmosphere. So the sea beside you now feels wonderfully real, not just imagined for the sake of a gentle bedtime, but part of a true and distant world where liquids gather under dim amber light and shorelines curve through haze in shapes so soft they seem designed for dreams. You walk only a little farther along the edge, enough to find a place where the shore narrows and then opens again into a long, smooth crescent of ice-hard ground. And there you pause, because the meeting of sea and land is so quiet that it seems to ask for stillness in return. Titan's surface is intensely cold, and the ground is thought to be made largely of water ice that behaves like rock at those temperatures. That makes the shoreline beneath your feet feel both familiar and strange, like a beach translated into another language, where the stones are frozen water, the sea is dark methane, and the sky above is wrapped in layers of haze thick enough to turn daylight into a kind of perpetual dusk. Titan's dense, nitrogen-rich atmosphere and high hazes soften the sunlight and mute the landscape into low-contrast shades of amber, bronze, and brown. In the calm flow of this relaxing story, that dimness becomes a gift, because nothing shines too brightly here. Nothing presses itself upon the senses, and the whole moon seems to understand the quiet art of not asking too much from a weary mind. You stand with the sea on one side and the silent land on the other, and after a little while, it seems that the dark surface beside you changes just enough to suggest a movement far out in the haze. Not a wave in any dramatic earthly sense, only a slight rearranging of reflection, a delicate shiver in the smoothness, as though the northern sea were turning over gently in its sleep. Scientists have studied Titan seas and lakes as active parts of the moon's methane cycle, connected to clouds, rainfall, rivers, and changing weather. That quiet activity feels deeply soothing tonight, because it means even this immense stillness is alive with patient rhythms, slow exchanges between air and liquid, between season and shore, between the hidden sky above and the black reflective calm below. And perhaps your own breathing begins to follow that rhythm more closely now, rising softly, falling softly, with no effort at all. In the softened distance, the sea disappears into haze so completely that there is no visible horizon, only the sense of a dark expanse extending outward beneath the orange veil. And that absence of a clear edge brings its own comfort, because the mind no longer has to decide where anything ends, and can instead rest in spaciousness, in the broad, continuous hush of a world that keeps its far places hidden. Somewhere behind you lie the inland basin, the ice hills, the old channels, and beyond them, the dark dunes you crossed earlier, all resting now in the same dim weather, all folded into one sleeping geography beneath Saturn's unseen presence. Titan is the largest moon of Saturn and moves through its parent planet's realm beneath a sky that the thick atmosphere mostly conceals from the surface below. You do not need to look up for Saturn now. It is enough to feel that it is there, pale and enormous beyond the haze, lending the northern sea an even deeper sense of shelter, as though the whole scene were enclosed within larger circles of quiet, moon within planet, shore within sea, breath within story, sleep within night. After a while, you lower yourself, slowly and comfortably, onto a smooth rise of ice-hard ground near the shore. And there, with no urgency at all, you settle into stillness, as if Titan itself had prepared this resting place for you. In Titan's lower gravity, every movement would feel lighter and more buoyant than on Earth, making even simple motion seem slower and gentler. So the act of lying back here in the imagination feels easy, almost floating, your body supported by the moon's calm, your thoughts drifting as lightly as haze across a dark, reflective sea. And from this quiet place, the soundless shore becomes even more soothing, because you are no longer moving through it, but resting inside it. The sea goes on breathing in its own slow way beside you. The sky remains dim and amber above you, and the land beneath you holds its ancient cold without harshness, only with steadiness. And in that steady place, the whole of Titan seems to become a cradle for deep sleep, a world of thick air, dark seas, and patient silence, where nothing is required of you now except surrender to rest. Let the northern sea keep its secrets. Let the haze keep its distances. Let the frozen shore hold you gently in the story's soft embrace. And if the sentences begin to blur now, if the images begin to drift apart and melt into one another like reflections on a dark, calm surface, that is perfectly all right, because this nighttime story was always meant to become softer than memory, slower than thought, until somewhere in the quiet breathing of Titan Sea, you find yourself breathing just as slowly, and then more slowly still, as sleep deepens around you like amber mist. For a long while, you remain resting on the smooth rise beside Titan's northern sea. And in the soft suspension of this bedtime story, it becomes harder and harder to tell whether you are watching the dark shoreline, or whether the shoreline is quietly watching over you in return, because everything here has entered that lovely state beyond urgency, where even time seems to lie down and close its eyes. The sea beside you is one of Titan's real hydrocarbon seas, part of a polar landscape where liquid methane and ethane gather beneath the moon's thick orange atmosphere. Yet the fact itself arrives gently, as all facts should in a calming narration, not with brightness or effort, but like a dim lamp glowing through mist, enough to warm the imagination without waking it, enough to remind you that this nighttime story is woven from a true and distant world where stillness has found unusual forms. The shore curves away into amber haze, and the water, if water is even the right word for such a dark and patient liquid, lies smooth as polished glass, so smooth that it seems made not to reflect the sky, but to absorb it, to take all that muted orange and hidden pallor, and draw it downward into a silence deeper than sleep. Titan's atmosphere is denser than Earth's, and composed mostly of nitrogen, with methane helping shape clouds, haze, and weather across the moon. Because of that heavy air, the light remains low and softened, the way light becomes gentle when seen through closed eyelids, and the whole landscape feels tucked away from harshness, protected from edges, from noise, from anything too sudden to belong in a relaxing story meant to help you fall asleep. You breathe in slowly, and in your imagination, the thick Titan air feels almost velvety, like another blanket resting above the first. And as you breathe out, the dark sea seems to widen, though perhaps it is only your awareness widening, growing broad and quiet enough to match it, somewhere out there, beyond the smooth near shore, and the gradual disappearance of all things into haze. The great sea continues in patient darkness, and you do not need to know its end, because tonight you are allowed the comfort of not reaching the far boundary of anything. Titan's northern polar regions are known for broad lakes and seas, some with shorelines and inlets that curve through the landscape like calm black signatures beneath the haze. Here, on this imagined rise of ice-hard ground, you feel as if you are resting beside one long sleeping breath of the moon itself. And now and then, the surface shifts by the smallest possible amount, not enough to form a wave in any restless sense, only enough to make the reflection seem to reconsider itself, to rearrange its dimness and settle again. That tiny motion is strangely comforting, because it tells you that deep calm is not the same as perfect stillness, that even in deep sleep, there are tides of breath, tides of dreaming, tides of thought appearing and fading so softly they never fully disturb the rest beneath them. The ground under you remains steady and cold in principle, though not in feeling, because in this bedtime story, cold is translated into quietness rather than discomfort. And the frozen crust of Titan, made largely of water ice that behaves like stone at those extreme temperatures, becomes a firm and faithful floor for your rest. It is a beautiful thing to imagine that on this far moon, the substance of rivers and rain on earth can become the bedrock of another world. And perhaps your own thoughts can do something similar tonight, transforming from flowing worries into something quiet and settled, something that no longer needs to run anywhere. Above you, the sky remains hidden within itself, layer after layer of haze softening whatever stars might otherwise be seen. And though Saturn is somewhere overhead, immense and pale and serene, it stays mostly behind the veil, present more as a feeling than an image. Titan's thick haze obscures much of the sky from the surface, turning the heavens into a muted glow instead of a sharp field of stars. That hiddenness is not a loss. It is a comfort. It means the universe has dimmed its lamps for you tonight. It means the cosmos, usually so bright with detail and distance, has chosen instead to speak in whispers, in blurred horizons, in soft amber breathing, in a sea that does not glitter but rests. And now, as this sleep story drifts deeper, it becomes pleasant to imagine that the shore itself is growing softer around you, not dissolving, only relaxing, as if every ridge of frozen ground were settling into a more comfortable position, and every trace of wakefulness within you were doing the same. You do not need to move anymore. You do not need to follow the shoreline farther, or trace the hidden bays, or wonder how far the northern sea extends into the dimness. The story can do the wandering for you now. The moon can do the waiting. The haze can keep the distance. Titan's lower gravity would make the body feel lighter than on Earth, as though rest itself had become a little easier to carry. So let that imagined lightness cradle you here beside the dark polar sea, where methane lies quiet under orange clouds, where ice has learned to become stone, where the sky has hidden its stars so your thoughts can rest untroubled, and where every slow breath seems to join the patient breathing of the moon. If a final thought arrives, let it drift out over the sea and vanish into the haze. If a final image lingers, let it lie down on the smooth black surface and go still. And if sleep is very near now, as near as the next exhale, you can let Titan keep watch in silence, holding you beside its velvet dark shore, while the whole serene world grows dimmer, softer, slower, and wonderfully far away from your resting place above the shore. It begins to feel as though the northern sea is drawing the whole landscape into a softer and softer hush, not by movement, not by sound, but by its patient way of simply being there, vast and dark and untroubled. And in this gentle sleep story that is enough, because some places do not soothe by doing anything at all, but by offering a stillness so complete that the mind slowly gives up its last small habits of tension and follows that stillness inward. You remain where you are for a while longer, breathing easily, letting the dark curve of the shoreline drift in and out of your awareness. And then, without urgency, without any firm decision, you rise again in the light and buoyant gravity of Titan, as if the moon itself has helped you stand not to continue a task, but simply to continue resting in motion. Titan's gravity is much weaker than Earth's, which would make movement feel softer and lighter, almost dreamlike in its gentleness. So you begin to walk once more along the shore, and the sea keeps pace beside you like a quiet companion, its surface so smooth that it seems more like a held thought than a liquid, a dark reflective calm stretching away beneath layers of orange haze. Titan's polar regions are home to real lakes and seas of liquid methane and ethane resting beneath a dense atmosphere. But even that fact arrives here as a lullaby rather than a lesson, because the truth of Titan is already so dreamlike that it needs no exaggeration, only the patient unfolding of one soft image after another, one dim shoreline, one hidden cove, one low ridge of ice-hard ground, one breath, and then another. As you move farther along, the coast begins to fold inward and outward in gentle arcs, and soon you come upon a chain of small coves, shallow inlets where the sea reaches into the land with tender patience, filling each curve with black stillness and leaving the edges of the shore outlined in muted bronze and shadow. These coves do not feel separate from the sea, only quieter versions of it, places where even the faint idea of motion seems to settle down and sleep. You pause at one of them now and look out across its dark surface. And because the haze above is so thick and the light so subdued, there is almost no difference between reflection and sky. Only a soft blending of dim orange above and dark calm below, as if the world had been simplified for the comfort of a tired mind. Titan's dense, nitrogen-rich atmosphere and persistent, haze-softened surface light and blur distant views into low-contrast amber tones. That blurring feels kind tonight. It means you do not have to see too far. It means the world has agreed to become smaller and gentler for you, narrowing itself to this one cove, this one curve of shore, this one easy breath moving in and out, while the bedtime story carries you onward without effort. The ground beneath your feet remains firm and quiet, shaped from water ice so cold that on Titan it behaves like stone. And this gives the shore a patient steadiness, a feeling of ancient support beneath every gentle step. You follow the edge of the first cove and then another, and each one seems to offer its own little chamber of rest, its own pocket of silence, held inside the larger silence of the moon. If you were fully awake, you might try to count them, might try to notice which one curves widest or which one reaches deepest inland. But now such distinctions no longer matter, because this nighttime story is carrying you beyond counting and beyond comparison, into that tender place where repetition itself becomes soothing, where cove after cove after cove feels like the turning of a very slow page in a book you do not need to finish before sleep arrives. Somewhere beyond the haze, Saturn remains above, hidden and pale and vast. But from here at the edge of the sea, its unseen presence feels even gentler than before, as if the whole sky were resting one large protective hand over Titan's dreaming shore. The sea remains beside you, dark and immense, yet never heavy in spirit, only quiet, only spacious, only wide enough to absorb whatever little wakefulness remains. And perhaps that is what begins to happen now, little by little, as you move through the dreaming coves beneath the amber veil, because each lingering thought seems to loosen and drift away over the liquid surface, each small worry widening like a faint ring, and then disappearing into the greater stillness. Titan's methane cycle includes clouds, rainfall, channels, lakes, and seas, linking sky and surface in slow, repeating rhythms. That slow rhythm seems to echo in you now, in the rise and fall of your breath, in the lightness of your steps, in the way your thoughts no longer come in sharp lines, but in soft tides, appearing, receding, and then leaving the mind more spacious than before. You reach a final cove, broader than the others, and there, the shore lifts into a smooth shelf above the liquid, a perfect resting place once again. And so you settle there with no sense of stopping, only of continuing more deeply into calm. The way a melody continues even after it has grown very quiet. The dark sea lies below. The orange haze hangs above. The frozen land supports you without a sound, and all around, Titan keeps its long, patient watch, asking nothing, explaining nothing, simply offering its thick air, its hidden sky, its sleeping coves, and its immense, soft silence, until the story itself begins to feel as though it is dissolving into that silence too. Sentence by sentence, breath by breath, gently carrying you farther from the day and farther into the deep, velvety rest that has been waiting for you here all along. From the smooth shelf above the cove, you rest for a long, quiet while. And then, in the slow drifting logic of this bedtime story, you find yourself rising once more, not because there is anywhere urgent to go, but because Titan seems to keep unfolding gentle places for you to wander through, each one quieter than the last, each one softer at the edges. And as you begin to move along the shore again, the land narrows into a low peninsula that reaches out between two sleeping coves, like a calm, dark finger laid upon the sea. And the whole world around you feels as though it has been lowered into an even deeper hush. On Titan, the broad northern polar regions are known for their lakes and seas of liquid methane and ethane, gathered beneath a dense atmosphere of mostly nitrogen, and wrapped in the moon's familiar orange haze. Yet here, within the gentle rhythm of this relaxing story, those facts do not arrive as something to study, only as something to lean into, because it is soothing to know that this peninsula, these coves, this sea-dark stillness, all belong to a real and distant moon where weather, shorelines, and quiet liquids truly exist beneath a hidden sky. You step onto the narrowing strip of ground, and the sea lies on both sides now, one cove to your left and another to your right, each one dark and level and dreamlike. And because Titan's gravity is so much lower than Earth's, every step feels light enough to be almost imaginary, as though walking and floating have become nearly the same thing. The ground beneath you remains firm and patient, made from water ice so cold that here it behaves like stone. And that strange reversal feels more comforting than strange tonight, because this moon has taught you, chapter by chapter, that familiar things can change form without losing their beauty, that water can become rock, that rain can be methane, that a sea can be black and still, and somehow more restful for it. Around you, the dense haze softens everything into layers of muted amber and brown, blurring the far shore, hiding the greater sky, and turning every distance into something tender and uncertain. And perhaps that is why the mind relaxes so fully here, because nothing insists on being sharply known. Nothing forces its outline on you, and even the horizon has the kindness to remain vague. Titan's thick atmosphere and persistent high haze mute the surface light and conceal much of the sky from view, creating a dim, low-contrast world at ground level. So you continue toward the tip of the peninsula, your breathing slow and steady, your thoughts now so softened that they seem less like thoughts and more like little currents moving beneath the surface of sleep. And when you finally reach the far end, you stop there and stand between the two quiet coves while the northern sea stretches beyond them, dark and glassy and immeasurably calm. No wind seems to trouble the liquid. No sound rises from the shore. Even the idea of time feels looser here, as though Titan has no interest in counting hours, only in holding stillness for as long as stillness is needed. Somewhere beyond the haze, the hidden sky remains pale with distance, and somewhere higher, still Saturn hangs unseen. the great quiet presence above Titan's orange veil, not visible enough to wake the imagination into brightness, only near enough to lend the scene a deep, invisible shelter. Titan is Saturn's largest moon, and from its surface, the heavy atmosphere would obscure much of the view overhead, keeping even that giant parent world softened behind haze. The peninsula beneath your feet curves so gently that it almost feels shaped by rest itself, by long ages of liquid and weather working with great patience. And that, too, is part of Titan's truth, because this moon has an active methane cycle with clouds, rainfall, channels, lakes, and seas that slowly shape its landscapes across vast stretches of time. In this bedtime story, though, that long science of sky and shore becomes almost lullaby-like, a reminder that not everything important happens quickly, that some of the deepest changes come softly, one drop, one season, one tide of weather at a time, until a moon learns how to cradle whole seas in its polar hollows, and a tired mind learns how to release one last strand of wakefulness into the dark. You lower yourself now onto the very end of the peninsula, where the frozen ground is smooth and slightly raised. And there, with sea-dark stillness on both sides, you settle more comfortably than before, as if you have arrived at a little resting place, prepared just for this moment. A narrow point between two dreaming coves where nothing can follow you except calm. To your left, the liquid lies flat and black beneath the haze. To your right, another cove holds the same sleeping reflection. Ahead, the larger sea fades into the orange dimness. Behind, the folded shoreline of the coves disappears back into the moon's tender distance. Titan's shores and inlets, especially in the north, have been mapped as complex edges between icy land and calm hydrocarbon seas. But you do not need a map now. You do not need names. You do not need to remember which way the coves curve or how far the sea extends. It is enough to rest here at the narrow tip of the land and let the whole moon become simple again. Thick air above, frozen ground below, dark liquid on both sides, hidden Saturn somewhere beyond, and within you, a quiet growing wider and deeper with each easy breath. If a thought comes, let it drift to the left cove and go still there. If another comes, let it drift to the right and fade into the black mirror. And if no thought comes at all, that too is perfect, because this nighttime story has brought you to a place where even thinking can lie down, where the peninsula itself seems to float between sea and sky, and where sleep, now very near and very gentle, can finally gather you into Titan's deep orange hush and carry you soundlessly onward. You remain for a long and peaceful while at the end of the narrow peninsula, with one quiet cove to your left and another to your right. And after some time, when the stillness has wrapped itself even more softly around you, the shape of the land seems to offer you one more gentle path forward. A low isthmus of frozen ground that curves away from the tip and leads between the dark sea and the dark sea again, as though Titan were drawing a slender ribbon through its sleeping waters. Just so your bedtime story could continue without ever needing to hurry. The northern polar regions of Titan are known for broad lakes and seas of liquid methane and ethane, their shorelines folding through the landscape beneath dense orange haze. In the deep softness of this nighttime story, that fact feels less like information and more like reassurance, because it means this quiet place truly belongs to a moon where dark reflective seas rest under a hidden sky. And tonight, that reality becomes the soft ground beneath your imagination. So you rise very lightly and begin to walk again, though walking now feels almost identical to drifting, because Titan's gravity is much weaker than Earth's and gives every movement the calm buoyancy of a dream in which the body has forgotten how to be heavy. The frozen land beneath your feet feels smooth and patient, made of water ice that is so cold here it behaves like stone. And there is something soothing in that transformation, in the way Titan keeps taking familiar things and turning them into quieter versions of themselves. Water becomes rock, rain becomes methane, sky becomes haze, and thought itself becomes less like a sharp line and more like a dim silver thread dissolving into sleep. The isthmus is not wide, only wide enough for a slow and easy path, and on either side the sea lies level and black, holding the dim amber glow above in a silence so complete that you begin to feel as though the whole moon is no longer around you, but gently within you, as if your breathing and Titan's great stillness had fallen into the same slow rhythm. Titan's dense atmosphere, composed mostly of nitrogen and layered with haze, softens sunlight and keeps the surface world subdued, low in contrast and dreamlike in tone. That muted light now seems to hover over everything equally, not bright enough to cast a sharp shadow, not dark enough to hide the shore, only dim enough to make all edges kind. And in that kindness, the mind relaxes a little further, releasing one more thought, one more memory of the day, one more small habit of wakefulness into the dark sea. On either side, you continue along the narrow strip of ground, and now and then the shore curves inward in tiny inlets where the liquid reaches gently toward the land, and then outward again in smooth arcs where the ice-hard edge leans over the stillness like the lip of a sleeping bowl. Titan's methane cycle includes clouds, rainfall, rivers, channels, lakes, and seas. So its shorelines belong to a real pattern of weather and slow planetary change. But tonight, in this calming narration, those processes feel as soft as breathing, as natural and unforced as the rise and fall of your chest. And so, the moon no longer seems remote or alien in the ordinary sense, but quietly familiar in rhythm, familiar in patience, familiar in the way it receives and releases without ever becoming loud. Far beyond the haze, Saturn remains hidden above, immense and pale, though from the surface Titan's thick atmosphere would obscure much of the sky and soften even the presence of its parent planet into a distant glow. That hidden nearness feels like a final layer of shelter, as if the whole scene were nested inside deeper and larger circles of rest. Your body within the story within Titan's haze, Titan within Saturn's quiet dominion, and all of it held within the larger dark, where nothing needs to be explained before sleep can take you. The isthmus begins to widen very slightly now, just enough to become a low, rounded spit of land where the shore broadens and the sea falls back on both sides. And here the ground is especially smooth, as though centuries of soft weather and patient stillness have been preparing a resting place. You come to the center of this little widening and stop there, with dark sea to the left, dark sea to the right, and orange dimness above. And all at once, it feels unnecessary to walk any farther. Titan's seas and lakes have calm, dark surfaces beneath the moon's subdued light, especially across its northern lake districts. So you sit down on the smooth, frozen ground, and then, after another easy breath, you let yourself rest more fully, lowering into stillness as if the land itself were cradling you. Nothing moves except perhaps the faintest shift in reflection on the liquid surface, and even that is so small it seems like the sea dreaming rather than stirring. The orange haze remains above you like a second blanket, the ice-hard land beneath you like a quiet promise, and the two seas on either side like twin mirrors, where every last waking thought can go and gently disappear. If one thought lingers, let it drift left and fade into the cove dark stillness. If another appears, let it drift right and go soundlessly still. And if no thought appears at all, then simply remain here on Titan's gentle isthmus of sleep, where the moon's thick air, dark seas, hidden sky, and patient silence have all grown so soft, so slow, and so far from the noise of day that the story itself now seems content to lie down beside you and rest. Now, from the smooth center of that quiet spit of land, where the dark sea rests on either side, and the orange haze hangs overhead like a tender veil, you feel the whole moon growing even gentler around you, as if Titan itself has decided that the time has come not for further wandering, but for an even deeper kind of resting, the kind where a sleep story stops feeling like a path and starts feeling like a blanket. And so, in the slow and velvety hush of this bedtime story, you remain where you are and simply let the landscape continue its patient work upon you. The work of softening, dimming, loosening, quieting, until every part of you begins to understand that there is nothing left to do tonight except fall asleep a little more completely. On Titan, the northern regions hold broad seas and lakes of liquid methane and ethane beneath a dense orange atmosphere, and that true and distant reality gives this resting place its calm, dark beauty without needing to make it any louder than it already is. Around the widened isthmus, the sea forms a kind of sheltered lagoon, not marked on any map you need tonight, only felt as a still black cradle cupped by low frozen ground. And if you look to the left in the imagination, the liquid lies smooth and untroubled. And if you look to the right, it does the same, so that your mind, like the shore, no longer has to choose between directions, but can simply settle into the sweet relief of being held between two equal silences. Titan's atmosphere is mostly nitrogen and much denser than Earth's, with haze that softens the light and leaves the surface world muted and low in contrast. Because of that thick air, everything here seems cushioned from harshness, as though the universe has lowered its voice, especially for this gentle bedtime. And the orange glow above you no longer feels like a sky at all, but like the inside of a closed eyelid, warm in color, dim in tone, and perfect for deep sleep. The ground beneath you remains steady, composed in large part of water ice so cold that on Titan it behaves like stone. And that strange and lovely fact now feels like the most natural thing in the world, because this moon has already taught you how softly the familiar can change when it travels far enough into the night. So you rest upon frozen water that has become land, beside seas that are not water, but still know how to lie still, beneath clouds and haze made from substances that on Earth would seem unusual. And yet none of it disturbs the calm, because in this relaxing story, all of Titan's differences have become soothing, each one another reason to let go of the ordinary and drift a little farther from the busy edges of the day. There is no need now to continue in any deliberate way. And still, the story goes on, because stories, like seas, can move without seeming to move. And so you become aware of a soft curvature ahead, where the dark liquid bends inward and forms one last protected nook, a little lagoon within the larger quiet, sheltered from every imagined ripple, a place so still it seems made for the final unwinding of thought. You do not walk there exactly. Rather, your awareness glides there, as light and easy as breath in Titan's low gravity, where movement would feel more buoyant and gentle than on Earth. And now you are there at the margin of that lagoon, looking out over a black reflective surface, so calm that it seems less like liquid than like rest itself given shape. And beyond it, the haze grows thicker, turning the far shore into softness, the far distance into mercy, the far world into something you no longer need to reach. Titan's methane cycle includes clouds, rain, channels, lakes, and seas, linking sky and surface in long, slow rhythms. And tonight that rhythm feels like the deepest lullaby of all. Rise and return, cloud and shore, breath and release, story and silence. All of it happening with such patience that your own breathing begins to borrow its pace from the moon, becoming slower, lower, quieter, until each exhale feels like a small boat slipping soundlessly into dark water and disappearing into the haze. If there is any breeze at all, it is too faint to name. If there is any motion on the lagoon, it is only the tiniest suggestion, the kind of delicate shift that might happen when a dream turns gently in its sleep. Above you, Saturn remains hidden beyond the veil, its presence softened by the same atmosphere that keeps the stars from shining sharply down to the surface. Yet, that hiddenness is comforting now, because it means nothing bright can call you back to wakefulness. Nothing distant can demand attention, and the whole sky has agreed to remain quiet until morning. In this nighttime story, in this calming narration, Titan has become less a moon than a mood, less a destination than a resting place, and everything that was once remarkable about it has slowly transformed into a kind of peace, the thick air into protection, the black seas into stillness, the frozen ground into support, the haze into softness, the unseen heavens into shelter. So let the lagoon hold whatever wakefulness remains. Let the orange dimness cover the last bright corners of thought. Let the dark sea on either side, and before you become one continuous velvet calm. And if the words themselves are beginning to blur now, becoming slower than meaning and softer than memory, then that is exactly as it should be, because this sleep story was never meant to stay fully awake all the way through. It was meant to drift with you, to grow quieter with you, to lie down beside you here on Titan's soft black shore, and finally, gently, peacefully, go to sleep, now beside the sheltered lagoon where the story has nearly learned how to sleep. The whole landscape seems to soften one final degree, as though Titan itself were drawing a slow and gentle blanket over every shore, every dark inlet, every smooth black reach of sea, and over you as well, until nothing remains uncovered except the faintest thread of awareness, light as mist and just as willing to drift. The lagoon before you lies perfectly still, joined in spirit to the larger northern seas of Titan, those real dark bodies of methane and ethane that rest beneath a sky of dense orange haze and patient weather. And because this is a sleep story, a bedtime story, a gentle bedtime meant to carry you toward deep sleep, the science does not arrive as something bright or waking, but as a quiet reassurance that this strange calm belongs to a real moon, a real hush, a real world where stillness takes unusual and beautiful forms. You remain at the water's edge, though even the idea of edge begins to blur now, because the dark liquid, the frozen land, and the dim amber air all seem to dissolve into one another with such tenderness that there is almost no need to tell them apart. Titan's thick atmosphere, composed mostly of nitrogen and wrapped in high haze, would soften the light at the surface and keep the world low in contrast, dreamlike and subdued. That softness is everywhere now. It rests above you like a second night, and it settles below you too, through the smooth, icy ground that on Titan behaves like stone because of the immense cold, making the land itself feel firm, ancient, and quietly dependable. A peaceful place for a tired mind to set down its final waking weight. There is no need to move. And yet the story continues in the smallest possible way, not forward exactly, but inward, like a calm breath deepening all by itself. And so your awareness drifts along the margin of the lagoon and into a small natural harbor where the shore curves around the liquid in one last gesture of shelter. as if the moon were gently cupping the sea in its hands. The harbor is not busy, not defined by anything human, only by shape and stillness, by the way the land bends protectively, and the black surface lies within it like polished sleep. Somewhere beyond, the greater sea continues under haze, and beyond that, the rest of Titan waits in soft, hidden distances: dunes, plains, channels, basins, and icy hills, all resting under the same orange quiet that has carried you here chapter by chapter. Titan's surface shows signs of rivers, channels, lakes, seas, dune fields, and weather driven by a methane cycle, giving the moon a calm but active landscape shaped by sky and surface in long, repeating rhythms. Tonight, though, those long rhythms have become part of your own. Breath rises, breath falls. Thought appears, thought fades. The story comes near, then farther away, like a shoreline seen through mist. And because Titan's gravity is so much lower than Earth's, even this imagined resting seems lighter than rest at home, as though your body were being held by a world that asks less of it, a world where heaviness is reduced, and every exhale can float a little farther into silence. So you settle more deeply at the harbor's edge, and the surface before you becomes a mirror darker than memory, one that reflects not sharp images, but softened tones: bronze, black, amber, shadow, the colors of a nighttime story that never wanted to wake you, only to stay near until you no longer needed it. Above, Saturn remains hidden behind Titan's veil, and the stars too are dimmed by haze, which means the sky has kept its promise of gentleness, refusing brightness, refusing spectacle, offering instead the kindness of concealment, the mercy of a universe that has lowered its lamps so you may rest. In that hidden sky, there is comfort. In that hiddenness, there is permission. You do not need to follow the heavens tonight. You do not need to trace the coast any farther, or wonder where the lagoon ends and the sea begins, or remember every relaxing fact that has drifted by in this calming narration. You can simply let the words become slower than thought, softer than meaning, more like warmth than language. Let the harbor hold the last little motions of the mind. Let the black sea keep them. Let the thick air close gently around the scene like velvet curtains. This is your relaxing story, now only in the faintest sense, because it has nearly become silence. And silence, on Titan, seems to know exactly how to care for you. If one last thought remains, let it move out across the harbor and disappear into the smooth, dark stillness. If one last image remains, let it fade into the amber haze where distance becomes kindness and detail becomes rest. And if nothing remains at all, except the feeling of being held beside a calm alien shore beneath Titan's heavy sky, then that is enough, more than enough, because the moon has done what it came to do in this gentle bedtime. It has offered you thick air, quiet seas, hidden stars, frozen ground, and the long soft hush of a place so distant from the noise of earth that sleep can finally arrive without effort, without edges, without end. drifting over you as slowly and tenderly as the last amber glow settling across a harbor that has already fallen asleep. And now, beside the quiet harbor where the dark liquid rests without a sound, the story becomes softer still. So soft that it almost seems to be listening to your breathing rather than speaking at all. And if you are already drifting, already slipping into that lovely space between deep rest and dreaming, then Titan is content to meet you there in silence. Because this moon has never needed noise in order to feel alive. Only haze, distance, and the patient hush of its sleeping shores. The harbor remains cupped by smooth frozen ground. And beyond it, the larger northern sea lies stretched beneath the dim amber sky, broad and calm and dark as polished obsidian. One of Titan's real hydrocarbon seas, gathered in the moon's polar regions under its thick, nitrogen-rich atmosphere. But in this bedtime story, even truth arrives like a lullaby. And so you do not need to hold the fact too firmly. Only let it float near you for a moment before it drifts outward across the still black surface and dissolves into the haze. The air above remains heavy and velvety, thicker than Earth's, with layers of orange mist that soften all distance and make the surface world feel low in contrast, muted and deeply sheltered. Because of that dense and tender atmosphere, there is no sharp horizon before you now. Only the feeling that sea and sky are slowly folding into one another, and that your own thoughts, if any remain, may do the same. You rest without moving, and the moon rests with you. The harbor holds its shape. The lagoon beyond it stays quiet. The larger sea remains wide and dark. Somewhere farther inland lie the old channels, the rounded hills of water ice, and the long dune fields shaped by Titan's winds over vast spans of time. Though none of them asks to be remembered in full tonight, Titan truly does have channels, lakes, seas, and dune regions shaped by weather and surface processes tied to methane and organic-rich sediments. Yet all of that grand science has become wonderfully gentle here, transformed into nothing more demanding than the idea of a moon that knows how to breathe slowly, a moon that knows how to keep stillness for hours, for seasons, perhaps for ages, while a tired listener finally lets go of the day. If you look up now, or rather if your imagination tilts upward through the orange veil, you may sense a faint and distant pallor above the haze. Not a bright sight, not a sharp image, only the softest suggestion of something vast beyond the clouds. And that almost hidden presence is Saturn, forever near Titan, and yet mostly concealed from the surface by the moon's thick air. In this chapter, that unseen nearness feels less like astronomy and more like comfort, as if a great lantern had been hung very far away behind layers of silk, glowing just enough to say that you are held inside a larger quiet. The strange and lovely nature of Titan continues beneath you too, because the ground supporting you is made largely of water ice so cold that it behaves like stone, turning one of Earth's gentlest substances into the patient bones of another world. And perhaps that too is part of the reason this sleep story feels so restful now, because Titan has gently shown you again and again that things may change shape without losing their calm, that water may become land, that rain may become methane, that sky may become haze, and that wakefulness may become sleep so gradually you hardly notice the crossing. The sea before you barely dreams now, if it dreams at all. Once, in a very long while, there seems to be the faintest softening on its surface, not even a ripple exactly, only a subtle rearrangement of reflected dimness, the sort of movement that might happen when a dream turns over and settles again without waking. Titan's seas and lakes are known for their dark, smooth surfaces beneath subdued light, especially across the northern lake districts where larger bodies of liquid gather. That smoothness becomes the whole language of the story now. Smooth sea, smooth ground, smooth breath, smooth fading of thought. The words themselves begin to feel like they are gliding rather than speaking, moving past you as gently as haze across a hidden sky. And if you no longer follow every phrase, that is not only all right, it is exactly what this gentle bedtime was always meant to invite. You do not have to travel any farther across Titan. There are no more steps to take tonight. The harbor is enough. The Black Sea is enough. The orange hush is enough. Even the faint, unseen glow of Saturn is enough. Titan's lower gravity would make the body feel lighter than on Earth. And perhaps that imagined lightness now reaches into your thoughts as well, loosening them, lifting them, letting them drift away one by one into the dimness beyond the shore. So remain here, resting at the edge of this silent moonlit harbor, while the thick air presses softly around the scene like velvet curtains, and the far sea keeps its endless dark patience. Let the last amber glow grow dimmer. Let the hidden planet stay hidden. Let the frozen ground continue to hold you without effort, and let the story, now barely more than a whisper on Titan's sleeping coast, become quieter than memory and slower than breath, until it no longer feels as though you are listening to it at all, but only as though you are resting within a calm and distant world where nothing calls, nothing shines too brightly, and nothing is left to do except drift a little deeper, and deeper still, into sleep. And now, resting beside the harbor at the edge of Titan's dark northern sea, you may begin to feel that the whole moon is becoming quieter than quiet, softer than softness itself, as if every part of this gentle bedtime story has been slowly dimming its own lantern until only the calmest glow remains. And in that tender near silence, the sea before you lies broad and black and still, one of Titan's real methane and dethane seas gathered beneath a dense atmosphere of nitrogen and orange haze. Yet tonight it feels less like a scientific wonder to examine, and more like a cradle of stillness wide enough to hold every last drifting thought and carry it out into rest. The air remains thick above you, and because Titan's atmosphere is denser than Earth's and softened by haze, the sky does not open into sharp stars or bright distances, but instead folds itself into a warm, dim veil, a kind of amber hush that seems made especially for deep sleep, for calming narration, for the slow unwinding of awareness that happens when there is nothing left to solve and nowhere left to hurry. Beneath you, the ground stays smooth and dependable, formed in large part from water ice so cold that here it behaves like stone. And that strange reversal feels wonderfully appropriate now, because this whole relaxing story has been a lesson in gentle transformation, in how familiar things may become unfamiliar without becoming frightening, and how the universe can change its materials, its weather, and its colors, while still speaking in the language of peace, so you remain exactly where you are, not asleep all at once, not awake in any ordinary way, but suspended in that lovely middle place where the body has grown heavy and the mind has grown light, where a nighttime story no longer needs to guide you step by step, because the landscape itself has begun to do the guiding. The sea telling you how to be still, the haze telling you how to soften, the frozen shore telling you how to rest without effort somewhere far beyond the harbor, and farther still beyond the coves and inlets you drifted through before. Titan's northern lake country continues in its patient geography of shorelines, channels, and dark liquid surfaces shaped by a methane cycle of clouds, rain, and gathered seas. But all of those distant features are now softened into one continuous calm, one immense sleeping world, whose weather moves slowly enough to feel almost like breathing. If you imagine the far sea now, it may seem to rise and fall in the faintest way, not in waves the way Earth would know them, but in the slightest change of reflected dimness, a tiny dream motion on a dark mirror. And that is enough, because rest does not require perfect stillness, only a stillness gentle enough to receive each small motion and quiet it again, just as your breathing rises and falls, and yet keeps carrying you deeper into comfort. Somewhere above the orange veil, Saturn remains close to Titan, and yet mostly hidden from view at the surface. And tonight, that hidden presence feels like the softest lantern imaginable, not something to look at directly, only something to sense through the haze, a pale and distant companionship hovering beyond the sky, reminding you that even here, in this far harbor, you are resting within larger circles of quiet. And because Titan's gravity is so much weaker than Earth's, even your imagined body here seems lighter than usual, as though the moon were asking you to carry less, to sink less, to strain less, and instead to float inward, gently inward, toward the kind of sleep where the edges of words blur into warmth, and the edges of thoughts blur into dark, reflective calm. This sleep story, this gentle bedtime, has now grown so soft that it no longer feels made of sentences at all, but of textures and distances, thick air, hidden sky, black sea, stone-like ice, and that faint, far nearness of Saturn behind the haze. All of it arranged around you with such patient tenderness that it seems the moon itself has been practicing the art of soothing for ages, waiting for a listener to tired enough to need exactly this sort of quiet. Titan's seas, dunes, channels, and icy ground together make it one of the most Earth-like and yet most dreamlike worlds in the solar system, with familiar patterns expressed through alien materials and deep cold, and perhaps that is why it feels so perfect for a bedtime story, because it is both recognizable and distant, both comforting and strange, a place where the mind can wander just far enough from daily life to finally let go. Now the harbor's edge seems to draw closer around you, not as a wall, but as a shelter, a smooth curve of land and darkness and haze that leaves no room for urgency. And if any small thought still remains awake, let it drift outward across the black surface and go quiet there. Let it become one more faint reflection in the sea, one more dim shape dissolving into amber distance until nothing is left but the simple feeling of being held beside a calm alien shore. You do not need to remember all the relaxing facts that have passed through this night, or the methane rain, or the sleeping coves, or the peninsula between two dark waters, because sleep is not built from remembering, but from releasing. And Titan, with its hidden sky and heavy air, and sea that barely dreams, is showing you exactly how release can happen, not suddenly, but softly, not with effort, but with permission. So let the harbor remain dark before you. Let the frozen ground remain steady beneath you. Let the orange haze remain lowered like a curtain over the world. And let the far pale lantern of Saturn grow dimmer still behind it, until the story itself becomes almost indistinguishable from silence, and silence becomes almost indistinguishable from sleep, and sleep, at last, becomes the only shore you need. And now, at the quiet edge of Titan's northern sea, beside the small sheltered harbor where the dark liquid rests beneath the moon's dense orange haze, this gentle bedtime story begins its final slow fading, not with an ending in the ordinary sense, but with the kind of soft dissolving that belongs to deep sleep, where one thought loosens, and then another, and then even the feeling of following the story becomes lighter than mist and calmer than breath. Titan, with its thick atmosphere, its muted amber light, and its dark methane and dethane seas, has carried you very far from the noise of the day and into a world where everything real has seemed gentle and everything strange has seemed kind. So there is no need now to go any farther, because this harbor is enough. This still shore is enough. This quiet moon is enough. And you may simply rest where you are, with the smooth, ice-hard ground supporting you, the black sea before you, and the hidden sky above you, dimmed by haze so completely that even the stars seem to have agreed to whisper tonight. Titan's thick, nitrogen-rich atmosphere and high haze soften the surface light and keep much of the sky concealed from view, which is why this world feels so hushed and dreamlike from the ground. That hiddenness is a comfort now, because nothing bright is left to call you outward. Nothing sharp is left to stir you awake. And the whole universe, at least from here, seems to have lowered its voice to almost nothing, as if the cosmos itself understood what gentle bedtime means. Beneath you, the land remains made largely of water ice that behaves like stone in Titan's immense cold. And even that fact, one of the loveliest and most unusual in this relaxing story, no longer feels like information to hold, only like a final soothing texture, a reminder that on this moon, the familiar has become calm in a new form, and that perhaps the mind can do the same as it settles into rest. The harbor stays perfectly still. The sea beyond it stays broad and dark. The haze remains lowered like a curtain of amber silk. And somewhere above that curtain, Saturn lingers close to Titan, present, but mostly hidden. A pale, distant nearness beyond the veil that does not shine strongly enough to wake the imagination, only softly enough to suggest that even in silence, you are held within something vast and peaceful. You do not need to picture it clearly now. You do not need to picture anything clearly now. It is enough to feel the great quiet of this moon, the way its low gravity makes all motion seem lighter, the way its seas lie dark and smooth, the way its shorelines curve with patient stillness, and the way its whole world has offered itself to you, not as a place to conquer or understand, but as a place to drift, to soften, to fall asleep. Titan's lower gravity would make movement gentler than on Earth, and its seas and shorelines in the north are real features of this calm polar landscape. But now movement itself is no longer needed. You may simply remain here in imagination, resting beside the black reflective water, while the last few words pass as slowly as haze over a hidden sky. If one thought still lingers from the day, let it move out across the harbor and become a dim reflection. Then let that reflection fade. If another thought rises, let it settle into the sea beyond, where the dark liquid holds it without sound and without urgency. If no thoughts rise at all, then let there be only this: the soft pressure of the moon's heavy air, the still support of frozen ground, the dim amber veil above, the black quiet before you, and your breathing becoming so steady, so easy, so untroubled that it seems to belong to Titan itself. This sleep story, this nighttime story, this calming narration has now reached the place it was always moving toward, the place beyond effort, beyond detail, beyond even wonder, where wonder becomes peace and peace becomes sleep. You do not need to remember the methane rain, the dark coves, the narrow peninsula, the gentle isthmus, the sheltered lagoon, or the quiet harbor, though they may remain somewhere in you like soft lanterns seen through fog. You do not need to hold the facts of Titan any longer either, even though they are beautiful, even though they are real, because now the moon can keep them for you while you rest. Titan truly is a world of thick air, dark hydrocarbon lakes and seas, icy ground, and weather shaped by methane. But tonight, all of that science has been translated into stillness, into softness, into a place for deep sleep. So let the harbor grow dimmer. Let the sea grow wider and quieter until it feels endless. Let the haze lower over every edge of the world. Let hidden Saturn fade into the gentlest distance. Let the story itself become slower than meaning and softer than memory. And as the final amber hush of Titan settles over the shore, over the sea, over the frozen ground, and over you, let everything loosen completely now. Let every last waking thread slip free, and let yourself drift soundlessly past the last faint edge of narrative into the calm beyond this moon, into rest without effort, into darkness without fear, into the deepest and quietest sleep of all.